2 days after a toddler disappeared from a busy shopping centre in England, the police made a horrifying discovery. The body of 2-year-old James Bulger was found on a railway line more than 2 miles away. The crime stunned the nation. But what investigators found and uncovered next was even more disturbing. The perpetrators weren't adults. They were just 10 years of age. So what happens when the perpetrators of a brutal murder are children? This shocking CCTV footage released to the public would show 2 young boys leading James Bulger away from the shopping centre. By 4 p.m, he was gone. 6 days later, the police arrested Robert Thompson and Jon Venables. This became one of the most heinous crimes in modern British history. In this video, we'll break down the crime, the investigation, the trial, and the lasting legacy of this case. On the afternoon of 12 February 1993, 2-year-old James Bulger was at the New Strand shopping centre in Bootle with his mother Denise. For a split second, she turned to pay the butcher, and in that short pause, James had wandered off. When she glanced back, he wasn't there. Inside the shopping centre, CCTV cameras captured what would become one of the most widely broadcast images in British criminal history. At 3:42 p.m, 2 young boys were seen leading James away by the hand. The boys with him were Robert Thompson and Jon Venables. Earlier footage showed the pair wandering around the shopping centre for more than an hour. Witnesses later recalled seeing them approach several children. Security staff had already noticed them shoplifting earlier that day. Investigators would later conclude that the boys appeared to be searching for a vulnerable child. Shortly before 4 p.m, James was seen leaving the shopping centre with them. It was the last confirmed sighting of him alive. James Bulger's body was found on a railway line more than 2 miles away, and investigators immediately realised they were dealing with a crime of shocking brutality. The discovery of James' body triggered what would become an intensive police investigation that would soon uncover a truth few people could comprehend. The investigation into James' disappearance quickly became one of the largest police operations in the region, as detectives began to connect disturbing dots. Police released CCTV stills from the shopping centre showing 2 young boys leading James away. The images alarmed the public, not only because a toddler had been taken from a busy shopping centre, but the suspects themselves appeared to be children. Members of the public flooded the police with calls. Several people recognised the clothing worn by the boys in the footage. That information allowed detectives to narrate their inquiries to local families. When investigators examined the crime scene, they immediately understood the severity of what had happened. Even experienced officers later described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they had encountered in their entire careers. The injuries indicated that James had been subjected to a prolonged and brutal attack. The biggest shock was still to come. Police soon identified the suspects as Robert Thompson and Jon Venables. The revelations of their age stunned the country and the world. Detectives now faced an unprecedented situation. They were conducting a homicide investigation into which the primary suspects were both primary school-aged children. Every step of the process had to be handled differently. Appropriate adults were present for every interview. Questions were carefully structured to avoid suggestion or pressure. Despite their age, both boys were formally arrested on 18 February 1993. The interviews that followed were long and closely monitored. Investigators relied on the CCTV timeline, witness statements and forensic evidence to test the boys' accounts. Over time, inconsistencies between their accounts began to appear. Each boy eventually blamed the other. But even before the trial began, the justice system faced a deeply controversial question. Should Jon Venables and Robert Thompson be tried in an adult court? This was one of the most controversial aspects of the case. At the time of the trial, both boys were 11 years old. Yet the law at the time required that anyone charged with murder be tried in an adult court. Think about this. Both boys were seated in an elevated dock so they could see the proceedings. They were surrounded by court officers and faced a full jury. From the outset, there was intense debate about whether the boys could genuinely understand the charges against them or participate meaningfully in their defence. Psychologists raised concerns about their developmental capacity, while legal commentators questioned whether the formality of an adult trial was compatible with their age. The trial raised questions that the British legal system had rarely confronted in modern times. Can an 11-year-old truly understand the meaning of murder? For centuries, the law had assumed the answer might be no. This principle was known as doli inca pax. It meant that children under the age of 14 were presumed incapable of forming criminal intent unless prosecutors could prove they understood their actions were seriously wrong. The Bulger case would ultimately play a role in the abolition of that protection in 1998. The media frenzy surrounding the proceedings were unprecedented. Daily coverage, often emotionally charged, shaped public opinion and placed extraordinary pressure on the justice system. When the jury returned a guilty verdict for both boys on 24 November 1993, the reaction was immediate and polarised. There was a mixture of relief, anger and renewed debate about how the law should treat child offenders. In delivering the verdict, the trial judge made another landmark decision. He lifted the boys' anonymity, allowing their identities, their names and photos to be published. He argued that the public interest in open justice outweighed the usual protections afforded to child defendants, particularly given the scale of the attention this case had received. The ruling set a significant precedent, influencing later cases involving young offenders and shaping the modern debate over anonymity, rehabilitation and public safety. The verdict didn't bring closure, only more questions, more pain and more anger. For Denise Fergus, James's mother, it must feel like the agony of her loss will never end. When Jon Venables and Robert Thompson were convicted in November 1993, a trial judge set a minimum sentence of 8 years. This reflected their age and the legal framework for juvenile detention at the time. But the verdict did not bring closure. Public petitions gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. And under intense pressure, the Home Secretary at the time, Michael Howard, intervened, increasing the minimum tariff from 8 years to 15. That decision would later become the centre of a landmark human rights ruling, because the case eventually reached the European Court of Human Rights. The court ruled that putting two 11-year-olds in an adult courtroom with a public gallery was never a fair trial. The court also found that the children of 11 could not be fully expected to understand or even participate in such formal proceedings, and that the sentencing should be insulated from public and political pressure. As a result, the tariff was reduced back down to 8 years. Both boys were released in 2001 at the age of 18. They were provided with lifelong anonymity, which was designed to protect their safety and support their rehabilitation. However, their release ignited public anger, with many arguing that the punishment did not reflect the gravity of the crime. Others pointed to ethical complexity of sentencing children, emphasising that the justice system must balance accountability with the possibility of rehabilitation, especially when offenders are so young. The tension between public demand for retribution and legal obligation to treat child offenders differently became one of the defining legacies of this case. It forced a reckoning with a difficult question: how should society respond when children commit serious crimes? And what does justice look like for the victim's family? And can rehabilitation ever reconcile public outrage? Well, with the trial over, the boys who killed James Bulger were locked away. But this story doesn't end with a verdict, because in 2001, Robert Thompson and Jon Venables walked out of their secure units as adults with new names, new faces, and identities. They were given protection so extensive that no one in Britain would ever know they lived next door. One of them would vanish so completely that to this day not a single confirmed detail of his adult life has ever surfaced. The other, however, would end up back behind bars, and the reason would disturb us all over again. Robert Thompson's reintegration has been, by every available measure, quiet. There is no confirmed reoffending, and he has complied fully with his licence conditions. His life is so carefully sealed off that he has effectively ceased to exist as a public figure. For youth justice advocates, Thompson is the case they point to, proof that even a child who committed such a heinous act of violence can, with intensive early intervention, be redirected. But here's the uncomfortable part of the argument. It only works if you don't look at what happened to the other one. Jon Venables' story after release is not a story of rehabilitation. In 2010, he was returned to custody. The charge? The possession of indecent images of children. He was convicted, sentenced, and released again under the same anonymity protection. Then it happened again and again, each time triggering new prosecutions, fresh risk assessments, and a question that grew louder with every hearing. Did the justice system that was supposed to rehabilitate Jon Venables actually understand what it was dealing with? Under the original framework, two boys, the same crime, the same sentence, and two very different outcomes, so wildly different that they became a fault line in every debate about youth justice in the UK. Thompson's silence is used to argue that redemption is possible. Venables' record is used to argue that some damage cannot be undone. And caught in the middle of that argument still is the family of the 2-year-old boy who never got to grow up. So here's the question that has divided Britain for over 3 decades. Should a person who tortured and killed a toddler be allowed to live under a name who we will never know, in a town we never will be told of, protected by a court order that makes it a criminal offence to reveal who they are? The trial judge imposed lifetime injunctions on both Thompson and Venables. The reasoning was blunt. If their identities were revealed, there was an immediate and serious risk they would be killed. The orders banned their names, photographs of them, any locations in which they may be, any fragment that could allow what the courts called jigsaw identification. If you share a photo of one of them online, you are committing contempt of court. People have been prosecuted for exactly that. Now you might hear and think, well, these children murdered a child. Why should they be protected? And that reaction is precisely why the order exists. Youth justice in the UK operates on a principle that a child should not be permanently destroyed by the worst thing they did at 10 years of age. That rehabilitation principle must remain possible, and that the state, having taken custody of that child, has a legal duty to protect their life, even when the public wants the opposite. That's the principle. Whether it holds up when one of those children grows into an adult who repeatedly offends is an entirely different question. Jon Venables' reoffending has tested those orders to breaking point, and after every conviction the same demand surfaces from the public: reveal who he is. The public, after all, has a right to know, and every time the courts have said no, not because the judges are naive, and not because they've forgotten what he did, but because lifting the order would, in their assessment, result in his death. And a justice system that sanctions that outcome is no longer functioning as a justice system. You don't have to agree with that, but you do have to understand it, because this tension between what the law requires and what grief demands is the engine that keeps this case alive for 33 years. And no one has felt that tension more than James Bulger's mother. For most people, the James Bulger case is something we remember: a headline, a documentary, a moment in the 90s that still makes us feel uneasy. But for Denise Fergus, it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, and it's every single day. Each parole hearing, every tabloid front page, every time Jon Venables is convicted of a new offence, and the case surges back into the news cycle. Denise is pulled back into the worst moment of her life, not by choice, but by the system. She has spent decades campaigning for greater transparency in parole decisions, for stricter conditions on Venables' release, and for something that sounds simple but has proven almost impossible: the right to grieve privately while in the face of the justice system making her grief profoundly public. Her argument has never wavered. Venables' repeated offending is, to her, living proof that anonymity and the release and rehabilitation programs have not worked. The system has chosen to protect the person who murdered her son and hold sway over her son's memory, and that every decision made on his behalf is another decision that ignores the family who just lost a 2-year-old boy. In February 2026, James Bulger's grave in Merseyside was vandalised. The memorial statues beside his headstone were damaged. Police called the act abhorrent. For Denise, it was confirmation of something she had said years ago: this case is never over. It doesn't recede. It doesn't become history. It follows her. And that is the part of this story that no legal framework accounts for. The courts talk about rehabilitation and about risk assessments, about balancing rights, and those are real considerations. But there is a woman in Merseyside who buried her son 33 years ago and who has never once stopped fighting for him. The system moved on. Denise Fergus did not, because she can't. Denise Fergus has said that the system failed her son twice, once on that February afternoon and every day since. But here's what's really acknowledged: the system knew it failed, and the Bulger case became the real reason it tried to change. In 1998, 5 years after the murder, Parliament abolished the doctrine of doli incapax. The principle literally means incapable of wrong. For centuries, English law had presumed that a child under the age of 14 could not truly understand the differences between serious wrongdoing and simple mischief. The prosecution had to prove a child knew what they were doing was gravely wrong. After the James Bulger case, that protection was stripped away entirely. A 10-year-old in England and Wales can now be charged, tried and convicted of murder with no legal presumption of innocence based on their age. Now, whether that's progress or overreach depends entirely on where you stand. Youth justice advocates argue the change was a political reaction driven by tabloid fury and public grief, not by developmental science. that it punishes children the system was supposed to protect. Supporters argue it closed an important loophole that allowed genuinely dangerous children to escape accountability. Both sides use the Bulger case to make their argument, and neither side has won. But the legal shifts didn't stop there. The CCTV footage of James being led from that shopping centre became one of the most recognised images in British criminal history. It also became a turning point in how media shapes justice. Those granny frames were published everywhere before the suspects were identified, before any trial, before anyone asked whether showing a murdered child's final walk on every front page was journalism or spectacle. The Bulger case is now a standard reference in media ethics courses, not as an example of good reporting, as a warning. And then there's the European Court of Human Rights. In 1999, the court ruled that Thompson and Venables had not received a fair trial. The Home Secretary's decision to override the judicial tariff and increase their sentence was struck down as political interference. These rulings didn't just affect this case, they redrew the line between political power and judicial independence for every case involving a child. So here's the uncomfortable legacy of the James Bulger case. It changed almost everything about how Britain handles children who commit serious crime. New laws, new sentencing frameworks, new anonymity protections, new media guidelines, and yet, 33 years on, not a single one of these changes can tell you whether the system got it right, because the fundamental question at the centre of this case has never been answered. A 2-year-old boy walks away from his mother in a shopping centre in Bootle. 2 10-year-old boys walk him to a railway line and killed him. Everything that happened after the trial, the newspaper headlines, the anonymity orders, and the political battles, as well as the legislative reforms, and the decades of Denise Fergus fighting for her son's name, all of it flows from that single afternoon. And after 33 years of debate, this is what we're left with, a legal system that was never designed to judge children for murder and was forced to do it anyway. A country that demanded justice for James and still can't agree on what those words mean. A mother who was told the system would protect her family and who has spent her entire adult life proving it didn't. Robert Thompson disappeared into a life no one will ever verify. Jon Venables keeps reappearing in ways no one wants to see, and James Bulger is still 2 years old. This case doesn't have an ending, and that's the point. If you think you know what justice looks like here, I'd genuinely like to hear it, because 33 years of courts, reforms and inquiries haven't figured it out yet. Leave your thoughts below, but remember there's a real family at the centre of this. Keep it respectful. If this case made you question what justice really means, I want you to watch this next video. A mother, 2 dead babies, and a system that got it catastrophically wrong. Same country, but very different outcome. And if you found this analysis useful, support the channel by liking, sharing and subscribing. It helps this evidence-based critique reach more people. For now, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.